to episode 7 of Meet the Toberts. Our podcast is about thriving in and out of medicine, no matter where you are in your medical career or training. And today's topic is going to be, we'll invite you into our circle of trust, generational influences. I'm Sue Tobert. I'm a retired pediatric cardiologist.
And I'm Darren Tobert. I'm a still practicing sleep physician and will be done in about a month. So
yeah. Awesome.
Together, we've got about 80 years of experience in medicine between learning and practice.
So let's dive into the topic, how generational influence affects healthcare and medicine. And, this is a topic you stumbled across and kind of, we really got caught up in it, right? This generational stuff. So why don't you explain how we landed on this?
Yeah, so basically, I just ran across the book, The Fourth Turning, which is written in 1997. And this is probably a good decade ago, maybe 15 years ago, where I found this book and I read it. And, at the time, 10 years ago, 2014, reading a 1997 book, I was just struck by how prescient the book was. It just predicted a lot of what happened in the intervening years. So 1997, pre-9/11, pre-Great Financial Crisis, and yet the book kind of didn't exactly precisely predict planes hitting a building, right, but it certainly predicted a crisis to come, and that's what they refer to as the fourth turning.
So what we learned around this is that there really is kind of that phrase, history repeats itself. The authors kind of hint at how circular life is, or what a spiral our historical timeline is, rather than being really linear.
Mm-hmm.
I really came to believe this history repeats itself. And in fact, now, having been in medicine long enough, I think I see medicine repeating itself too. So
yeah, I don't know. I think that medical training kind of gears you to think of a human life as a linear thing. You're born, you live a life, you get older, and you go through certain changes, but then you die, and that's the end. Whereas this fourth turning author, Howe and Strauss are the authors, they kind of went back further in history, and they found this turning or cycle that's about the length of a human life, and in which each generation of about 20 years has its role to play in the first, second, third, and fourth turning. So they call those turnings or seasons. And what they find is that there's a repeating pattern of a national mood and culture and the environment that we're in. And so they were able to go back in history and find these cycles of 4 generations. And each cycle, the pattern kind of repeats. So it's a really interesting approach to thinking about humanity and human life, in that we are part of a larger cycle, but we're not just linear and unique in and of ourselves. Our generations aren't always all different than whatever came before. If you look back about 80 years, you'll see your generation reflected in the generation of that time. Yeah. And so there's that kind of revolutionized my thinking about humanity and our place in the world. So,
well, and they don't actually just speak to American culture. They kind of broaden it even to global historical changes, back even into the 1600s. And I think that really broadened my perspective around having some hope that next generations can have some positive influence. When as we'll talk about in a minute, we come from kind of a pessimistic, cynical generation, which totally explains kind of how we are challenged in our careers even too. Mm-hmm. So we want to take a couple minutes to talk about each of the 4, what would you call them, categories or phases?
There's phases of the cycle.
Of the life cycle.
So ending with a crisis. So I think the easiest way to think about it would be to imagine back to the end of World War II. Clearly a crisis occurred from approximately the Great Depression up through World War II. So that was a crisis. Then there was the 50s generation. And the generation at that time would be called artists, and they would represent the silent generation, those born between 1928 to 1945. They kind of came of age in the post-war period. So my dad would fall in this generation. He was born in 1938, so he'd be right in the middle of that generation. And so artists, this generation, or the silent generation, value pluralism. So they value expertise and due process. They value an ordered, structured society with institutions that are reliably predictable, and expertise is important. So this is a generation. There was a boom in scientific discovery in the post-war period, and so that generation is known for the civil rights movement. And you can just think of them listening to transistor radios at the time. And Elvis Presley was a big kind of mainstream artist. Their main desire would be to belong. And, you know, the quotes from that era would be, you know, taking no chances would be the silent generation. And mostly we made our own fun. So they kind of would have to kind of just be out there and artistic and making their own fun. So that's the artist generation.
I think the unique thing about the silent generation, kind of this first category, this archetype of artists, is that they really were silent. And so they just hunkered down and did really hard work. They knew what scarcity was. They lived with that. They kind of emphasized that to their children. And this whole part about kind of making their own fun, but in a quiet sort of way. Really, if you are Gen Xers like us and think back to your parents, see if any of what we're kind of hinting at here sounds familiar to you, because that is who influenced us greatly. And so then the next category we talk.
Well, hold on.
Okay.
So the next generation to be artists is going to be Gen Z.
Yeah,
So
true.
Gen
Good
Z is basically our kids. So our kids were born from 98 through 2004, and the Gen Z is kind of labeled as 97 through 2010
That's true.
babies.
Yeah.
So the next artist generation will probably reflect some of what their grandparents did and how they were.
Yeah. Yeah, the authors kind of talk about how the generation you're in is not like, you don't exactly live the ideals of the previous generation. It's kind of the generation before that. So
No, you're usually different, right?
Yeah,
You rebel against
grandparents,
the
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So here we have the Gen Zers coming up, and there's different names for the Gen Z.
But they will come to prominence after the current crisis, and they will be the dominant and leading generation, kind of leads the nation in the 2030s and beyond.
Right. And we haven't
So-
really talked about the crisis yet. We'll get to
Right.
that. So just kind of tuck that away. So we've talked about the first archetype, the archetype of the artists, the silent generation, the Gen Zers. The second archetype we want to talk about is called the prophet archetype, which is really the boomers. And the boomers come to kind of adulthood during what's called the cycle of awakening. So think of these as individuals born between 1946, 1964. They really value a vision, art, music, religion. They're kind of the hippie generation, free love, Frisbees, Mustangs, and Ford Mustangs. And their desire there during this awakening period is to kind of defy their generation that raised them, to defy society and kind of whatever's going on from the socioeconomic standpoint. And there's a great quote by Timothy O'Leary that describes this generation: tune in, tune on, drop out. Maybe you've heard that before.
Turn on.
Tune in, turn on, drop out.
Right.
What did I say?
Tune in, tune on.
Oh, no.
Anyway, think about the people that grew up and the culture of the 1960s. So this would be when the prophets were becoming adults. And I think sometimes a generation has its greatest defining period during the teenage years and
Definitely.
into their 20s. So if you think about that generation, they kind of rebelled against Beaver Cleaver and the, traditional white middle class family model that was dominant in the silent generation. So they rebelled against that, and there was a flourishing of new art, new music, and the use of drugs and new religions and so on. And so, yeah, prophets kind of define that phase. So, yeah, do you want to talk about the next one?
Yeah. So we've talked about the cycle, the high cycle where the archetype is the artist, the awakening cycle where the archetype is the prophet. Now the third cycle is called the unraveling cycle, and those are the nomads, which we can totally relate to because we are nomads, which are the Gen Xers. So those individuals, that's between 1965 and 1980. Remember, we're talking about how the teenage and young adult years are kind of when they have their greatest influence and kind of coming to their current state of mind. So the nomad group values liberty, autonomy, survival, really hardy, and honor. And these are often known as kind of maybe the latchkey generation, the latchkey kids. Came to age during MTV, the beginning of the computer era. So not totally into like being on media and social media yet. That's the next generation. But what I like about the term latchkey kid is I can totally relate to that. And I'm just thinking back to growing up where my parents both worked. I'd come home after school as a young teen, and I had my own time to do what I wanted, but I was in charge of myself. And that independence really can become ingrained in that generation. So the desire of the nomad generation is to separate, to explore this independence. And one of the quotes that, well, a couple quotes we like are, "I'd rather be a cynic than a fool," right? Because we grow up cynical, questioning everything as a nomad, which totally reflects even how I practice medicine. And the other quote that is out there around this generation is, "The only constant in life is change." So nomads they maybe don't like change, but they embrace it. They move forward. It's kind of a transient immigrant type generation.
I would say our generation does like change. And, we're kind of the blow it up generation. We're like, another quote would be, life is just a facade, and reality is just for people who, don't like drugs, kind of a thing. So, we grew up in the MTV era, sex, drugs, rock and roll. We were less supervised by our parents who were boomers or silent generation. They were not aggressive, hovering parents. So we're the kids that were out all day long on a bike, away in the neighborhood, come home when it gets dark, kind of a thing. And so very independent. Desire was to separate and to be very reliant on ourselves and individualistic,
Yeah.
I'd say. So that's our generation. Now, it's kind of interesting in our family because we're kind of on the cusp. I was born in 1965. So that means I am just on the border between being a boomer and a Gen X, but culturally, socially, and just what resonates with me, I'm definitely Gen X. We've just watched a couple shows that are documenting boomers in retirement, and it's just so foreign to my way of thinking.
Yeah.
I just know I'm a Gen X,
Yeah.
not a boomer.
So we would be called early Gen Xers. But then again, I just want to point this out because we're going to tie medicine and medical culture into this. We were supervised, or we are supervised by late boomers, slightly older than us in leadership within medical organization and medical culture. And thinking about just me personally, my desire for autonomy and how medical culture is shifting, how there's the corporatization of medicine going on, as they call it now. That's a loss of autonomy for a nomad and really resistant. So my retirement time is perfect for me.
So the fourth generational phase or cycle phase is the crisis. And what do you need in a crisis? You need a hero. So the archetype of the crisis is the hero. So this will be the millennials. The previous generation here would have been the GI generation, right? The teenagers and young adults who fought literally in a global worldwide crisis and
Of World War One.
Of World War II.
Two, sorry, yeah.
And they struggled through that. They were, born in the Depression and fought in World War II. And so, the GI generation, or the
greatest generation.
Greatest generation, it's been called. So these would be people in the next cycle here.
Now.
Right now. So the heroes are the millennials. And so people born from 1981 to 1996. And what heroes tend to value is, the crisis kind of blows up prior institutions and prior norms of society. And it has to be rebuilt by the community again coming together. So while Gen Xers are more dominant in the unraveling, the heroes, millennials in this case, will be dominant in the rebuilding after the crisis. So the Howe and Strauss predict that the crisis runs now from about 2001, the 9/11, or some people date it to the Great Financial Crisis in 2007, but somewhere in there the crisis started, and they're predicting it'll run through about 2030. So we're in the process of maybe looking at and tearing down old institutions. Mm-hmm. The new generation, the millennial heroes, will come in, and they are going to value community, affluence, and technology. And we certainly see technology, taking a dominant role here. One example of that really resonates with me is the innovation of digital money, right? So Bitcoin is a technology that promises to revolutionize financial systems, which really need revolutionizing. I think everybody would agree with that. So this is a generation that was brought up with the internet and the smartphone. Yeah. Their impulse is to gather together and to do things together and to build these once great institutions back in a new form.
And hence social media. Think about this whole unique way of gathering together now on social media through technology. And think of how opposite this is of the nomads, right? Mm-hmm. The nomads want independence, liberty. They want to move away from the institution. Now here, these heroes, millennials, going to rebuild during the crisis, are really bringing this connection piece back together, which is of high value. So their desire is to gather. And here's a millennial quote we came across. I'm a millennial, which means whatever you say or do to me is always on record, right? Mm-hmm. So just this documentation of their generation as well in social media is really important. Mm-hmm. So do you think we covered the four cycles pretty well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the different generations. Yeah. All I can recommend is that if you're interested in this topic, it's certainly been fascinating to us, and we would strongly encourage you to read Howe's book, and we will link that in the show notes, right?
Right. So we've set the stage now talking about phases, and we want to now tuck in the culture of healthcare. So this is a new concept. We're not aware that anyone's really taken the fourth turning ideas and applied them to the culture of medicine, the culture of healthcare. And we think that by having this generational awareness, there's opportunity here for you to maybe better prepare for your career, better understand how you're interacting with your colleagues, maybe have greater awareness even about interacting with your patients, depending on what generation they're from. Mm-hmm. And so this is why we bring up the topic.
Yeah. Patients and staff, right? So,
staff, yeah.
Based on the age of the staff person who might be mentoring you at the time, you can kind of understand where they're coming from a little better, I think. And you can maybe even start to predict their responses to different situations that we come across in medicine. So we really think that an understanding of the concepts in the fourth turning would really help you
Yeah.
prepare for your future
Yeah.
career and the kind of changes that
Yeah.
we're going to see.
Can I add something to that? So, when we talk about the culture of burnout in medicine, the high rates of burnout that exist, when you look at some of the bigger organizations, American Medical Association, the National Academy of Medicine, et cetera, a lot of what they talk about is build a strong culture within medicine. And I got to tell you, like, I've scratched my head about this. First of all, nobody really talks about what culture in medicine is like, what organizational culture is like. Like, there's a little bit of information out there. My personal belief is that the generational patterns have a huge effect on medical culture. And there's more study that needs to be done on that. Not just trying to describe medical culture as a linear one and done kind of one category of issues, but instead let's look at how the different generations influence how medicine is unfolding and unraveling. So yeah, talk about that a bit.
Well, so my personal feeling is that we are currently in the midst of a crisis. And so that means we'll be looking to millennials, which are now probably people at the end of their residency and fellowships and just becoming staff. So these are the people who are ultimately going to get into positions of medical leadership, and they will form the new institutions. So what we're seeing in medicine currently is the institutions of the past that led us to this point have been kind of, I think, revealed as very deeply flawed. As an example, the whole mock paradigm where we have to maintain our certification by providing fealty to a huge group in Washington, D.C. We pay them large amounts of money. We submit to testing again and again. An example of licensing for physicians being state by state. Why the heck is that? People are mobile these days. They want to move quickly and nimbly. Why can't we have national licensing, for instance? I think the pandemic revealed a lot about the political nature of some of the national institutions that we have relied on, such as the CDC, NIH, et cetera. So these are now, I think, revealed as political creatures. That's not a political statement. I'm just saying it's really clear to anybody who's objective that these have a very heavy political element to them. They are not just pure white medical institutions by any stretch of the imagination. They're heavily involved in politics. So I think that there's now also revealing of what a complete debacle the medical insurance complex is.
Oh yeah.
If you've practiced at all, you've had nothing but hassles with insurance companies, and sometimes very arbitrary, capricious, and ridiculous rules that they apply with a broad brush. So these institutions are the kind of thing that need to be torn down now and then rebuilt by the millennials, who will have a more communitarian approach. So I wouldn't be surprised if, and this is just me speculating, but I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see things like national health care come to pass. I don't like that as a millennial, or as a Gen X.
Yeah, Gen X.
I really don't like that because I value individual liberty, freedom, and the right to make your own decisions. I would prefer if we had a private health system, for sure. But I don't think that's what we're going to get. I think the crisis will likely lead to national health care. And then if we get national health care, eventually there will be movements to unionize physicians as a collective and as a group. I think millennials will support that more than, say, our gen would.
Yeah. Well, and as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking too, right? The next group after the millennials is going to be the Gen Zers, right? Who value expertise, who value fairness, this due process. And so you can see then how working collectively, the millennials and the Gen Zers are going to be much more creative in coming to sort of a unifying, healthy process within medical culture and org culture in medicine. And so here's where I'm at is like, I have tapped all of my creativity in what I can do within my nomad latchkey brain around how I can manage and contribute to medicine. Hence, I've retired. But there's hope. I feel like even though we don't know the answers, and that's the process of change I have to trust as a nomad, even though we don't know the answers, I feel like there's hope and trust with the up and coming millennials and Gen Zers to come up with a fair process that is different than what's going on now, that gets rid of all the pinch points we have around practicing medicine now. So it creates, for me anyway, this feeling of they're creative. I'm going to trust them. They're resourceful. They're going to come up with some really good ideas. And I might be dead by that time.
Well,
right?
those ideas will predominate for a time, but if you remember back to the
I know.
last fourth turning,
Yeah.
coming out of the war, we had that kind of, I call it the beaver cleaver kind of society in
Yeah.
America, right? And that worked for a while.
A while.
And there was a lot of prosperity and a lot of improvement, but then the rebellion came in the 60s, and
Yeah.
a rebellion will come in medicine as well. So I think it's just a really interesting framework to think through.
Definitely.
Some of the changes. It certainly helped me understand maybe some of the conflicts I was having with administration and with just the whole paradigm that we're functioning under. We're still under a boomer paradigm right now, and we're going to transition to a Gen X paradigm, which will be a quick one probably, and it'll be a teardown. And then we'll expect the millennials will come up and build better, different institutions than what we've had in the last cycle. So it's an exciting thing to think about. I think it's just really a good way to think about
well, and
life and medicine.
I appreciate what you say about a framework, right? Like there are so many models and algorithms that exist out there, even in how we practice medicine day to day. And so we're inviting this framework in and hoping it like ignites some further thinking on your part so that there's a more expansive view, not just simply thinking that medicine is moving forward in a linear way, more tech, more layers of government, more layers of regulation, et cetera. This is a spiral. It's going to change. And thankfully, generations change enough that there's something new and fresh that can come forward. That's exciting. That's really exciting.
As my advice would be to young physicians coming up is get an understanding of this early, read the fourth turning and just think through things and don't resist these changes. I think if any distress that you're feeling is related to your interaction with other generations, just think through that. Think about where they're coming from. Think about where things are going, whether they like it or not, and go with the flow is what I would say. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, that kind of lands on our 3 takeaways for today's discussion. Like the number one takeaway, act your age. Like, find the rhythm within your generation, but run with the spirit of the current cycle. Don't reject it. And don't run with the last cycle. Like it's time to move on. So be willing to observe and shift with the newer generational influences. Just kind of keep that broad perspective around that. The second point is grow your awareness around these generational influences and how they contribute to not only your learning and your practice, but how they can actually affect organizational culture. And maybe we can then gain a broader understanding of organizational culture within medicine. And 3 key areas, and I feel really strongly about this as a physician coach, 3 key areas of generational difference to really grow your awareness in are around values. Your values are different than the previous generation, the next gen, what your expectations are, and then also communication styles, and those shift over generation.
Right. I mean, I would say to millennials listening, don't be afraid to speak out about the problems that you see in the current medical institutions. Don't be afraid to start, tearing them down and imagining we're going to tear them down, right? I mean, the Gen X people are just coming to power in medicine. I think they'll either be torn down or they'll collapse.
Right.
But millennials, start thinking about new ways of doing these things and new ways of practicing medicine that might fit better with your values of community.
Right. Well, and don't let your voice be squelched, because guess who you're sharing these ideas with? The nomads, like the built-in cynics, right? Like your shirt today says pessimism, it will never work. Like the first words out of our mouth are often no, and here's the reasons why it won't work. Just listen to it, but don't necessarily accept it.
Mhm.
Keep moving forward.
Right.
And then
And
that,
don't be afraid to make radical changes too. I
Right.
think we are in a crisis, and the crisis needs to play out. If the crisis gets too stunted, then we're just going to remain in crisis longer.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say is
Yeah,
don't be
speak
afraid
out
to
and
don't be
change.
afraid to blow things up a little bit and
Yeah.
make some change.
I like that because nobody's really saying that right now.
I know.
Yeah, nobody's really saying that. So new framework, new concept.
Well, we're new Gen Xers,
Well,
and
yeah,
we're just
that's
at
true.
we're kind of at the age where you'd be in leadership. We're choosing to retire, but so millennials, be prepared to be imaginative and create new institutions.
Yeah, be empowered by that.
Yeah.
Okay, the third takeaway is we're just going to put out there that even though there's a lot of angst around burnout and there's concern that burnout rates are climbing, et cetera, we're going to say that as the prophet and nomad generations retire, so that's going to be the boomers and the Gen Xers retire, that burnout rates are going to fall. So we don't have to be that worried about burnout. Maybe a little bit of burnout incites all of us to perform better in the end. And you're looking at two people who have experienced burnout here. So it's not like we're unfamiliar with this. But community and connection and the values of the hero generation, that is the millennials, the Gen Zers that are coming up, they're already creating a more healing environment because it's those newbies that are thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we just need to go away, us nomads. So
yeah.
Anyway.
You could toss us out with the trash. We've been tossed out all our lives. So
yeah,
it's just the characteristic of our generation.
It's okay. It is what it is.
It is what it is. And it's, I like being a cynic. I really do. It resonates with me. Like it's just, that's who I am. And so, yeah.
But sometimes your cynicism is a little bit over the top.
Yeah. I'm a very good example of my
You are a very good example of your generation. And your kids, I'm just going to say, boy, they like pushback.
Oh yeah, they push back hard.
They have a voice, so they haven't lost their voice, right?
Well, we're raising artists, so they are going to want to go along to get along, and they're going to be the beaver cleavers of the 21st century.
Okay, but we're not helicopter parents.
Oh no,
right?
Well, we're definitely more helicopter than our parents were.
Well, that's true. Our parents were absent sometimes,
right.
But we love them. We love them.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're going to bring this in for a landing. Thank you for coming into our circle of trust today and thinking about the generational framework with us. Next time is going to be our season finale, and we are bringing in Gen Zer, right?
Yeah,
a third-year medical student who just happens to be our daughter. So looking forward to seeing you back next session. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.